Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar Podcast. I'm excited for today's guest. He is the CEO of Diomo and RichardParker.com. And what they do is they help individuals acquire businesses. And his program, How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price, has sold over 100,000 copies in more than 80 countries. So I'm very excited to be hearing from you today. This is going to be a lot of fun. So welcome to the show, Richard Parker. You ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to having a nice chat with you.
Awesome. And so just so that everybody knows, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so I've got a little bit of a thing in my throat here. So forgive me if there's any crackling or anything that happens. But we're going to try to get through this. But we always start here on a good note. So tell me a story of success in your business that we can be inspired by.
Hey, so let me, I've acquired 13 businesses in my career. I help people buy businesses. That's the majority of what I do. So let me pick out a couple of events that were pretty significant in my life related to businesses that I acquired, because I think people who are looking to do that can relate. And then hopefully we'll talk about some, because they're all not just successes, had a few terrific failures too. So one of them was a company that I was looking at. I was looking to expand one of my first businesses that I acquired, and I found an ancillary company. I was in importing and representing manufacturers, selling consumer products to retailers in Canada. I grew up in Canada before I moved to South Florida. And there was a company that was in the retail servicing business. Canadian stores typically are more self-serve than they are in America, less staff. And so as a manufacturer, supplier, you send stuff into the stores and somehow never gets onto the shelves. So this company had people that went into the stores and actually put merchandise onto the shelves, or ad events, advertising events, made sure the products were set up. And I wanted to add that to my suite of services, if you will. And I was doing it on a very small basis. And I found a company in Eastern Canada that was doing it more technologically advanced than I was. And I thought it would be a perfect fit. I convinced the owner of the business rather than sell it, because he wanted a whole lot of money, which I couldn't afford. But I convinced him that I've got this idea that we could really explode this thing. Instead of doing it in a few little areas in Eastern Canada, we can explode this across Canada. And to his credit, and his wife as well, they bought into the concept, and I put down just a little bit of money, bought a company that was, cost me, $100,000, which was really all that I could afford at that point. And we built that tiny little business into a $4.5 million business with ridiculous profits. We were selling labor. So we didn't have inventory. We didn't even have offices. Everybody worked from their homes. And this is 20 something years ago. So, it was really ahead of its time. And the margins were ridiculous. Like people were maybe getting paid $6, $7, $8, $9 an hour at that point, and we were billing out at $20 and $25. So it was really profitable. And then the other one, it's on a good note, is I acquired the rights for Sega Video in Eastern Canada. My company was doing about $2.5 million. I acquired it by accident, actually. A friend of mine was trying to become the CEO of the company. They had a distributor. The distributor's doing a shit job, excuse my French, and the product wasn't like it's supposed to be, at retail. And this was at the time when Nintendo had 80% of the market, Sega had 20. It was just before the launch of the Sega Genesis. So when I give you the numbers of how my business grew at that point, this has nothing to do with me. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And my buddy was trying to get the rights to become the CEO of the company, but he needed to do this enormous study to present to Sega America and Sega Japan to demonstrate the current distributor wasn't doing their job. I had all of the people in place doing servicing of other products, as I just alluded to, across the country. And I said, this is, again, he was a buddy of mine. So I said, you know what, I'll do the whole study for you. No problem. It cost me about $10,000. But again, he was a buddy of mine. I wanted to see him get the CEO position. And I said, if you happen to get it, just carve out the rights for me for Eastern Canada. But understand, I had no idea what it was. I didn't know like a Game Boy from a Game Gear from like, I was not a gamer. So it was just to me adding on another product. So he ended up getting it. I got the rights to Eastern Canada, and my business grew from like $2.5 million to $30 million in a year. It was ridiculous. And when I, tell that story, it's like I'm a little embarrassed because, again, it had nothing to do with me. I did the work for him just as I just wanted to help him out, and never really knew what the business was like. So, call it karma, call it just being in the right place at the right time. But that was a pretty significant story of success.
Wow, those are amazing. I'm actually in Eastern Canada, by the way. I'm in Moncton, New Brunswick. So
Okay, I've been there.
you
Been
must
there.
have been.
I've been there, been
Yeah.
all over the Maritimes. I used to go to Newfoundland every summer to go fishing. And I've been as far as Labrador. I went past the tree line. I went on a 17-day fishing trip. It was supposed to be 12 days, but we got weathered in. So we couldn't get the plane out. We were starting to get cabin fever after a little bit as the river was rising. But yeah, I've been all over the Maritimes. I love the Maritime provinces. Great
Nice.
people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, those are some pretty crazy good stories right place at the right time. And, obviously it worked out quite well. But now with the good notes, sometimes there's some bad notes along the way as well. I'm wondering, can you share me the opposite of that? Was there some things that just did not go very well that, we can learn from?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of people talk about all of their wins, right? And that's all fine and good. And some people have a series of wins. My philosophy is the losses get you closer to the wins. And if failures are terrific, especially if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, because you dust yourself off and you get going. But you learn if you do it in a good way, you could learn a hell of a lot more from the failures than you do from the successes. And so, a couple that come to mind, I actually got into business as a result of a terrible failure. I was working at a consumer products company in Canada. I was 29 years old. Company was growing exponentially. I was in a job that probably I didn't qualify for, but the company was growing so fast they had to plug the holes of people. So I got promoted. I was on a fast track to promotion. I was the executive vice president of a pretty nice division. I was 29 years old. I was making $72,000 a year. And I bought some stock in a company called Worlds of Wonder, which was a Teddy Ruxpin doll, which was a very hot toy at that point. And then someone told me about the magic of buying stocks on margin, which was, I had no idea, which was, hey, you could buy the double the amount of stock for the same amount of money. And when the stock price goes up, you sell it, you make all this extra money, and you only have to put out half. And that sounds absolutely terrific, except if the stock goes down. And so this stock went down to like zero. I blew $60,000. This was in a year when I was making 72. I had my first kid on the way. And so I was like I was in a terrible hole. And my only choices at that point, like when I was looking at it, is like, I'm never going to get out of this. Right. And so if I just take jobs, or if I get another job and I'm making a little more, well, I'll get out of this a little bit. But I mean, $60,000, which,
Yeah.
When you take a look at, I was making $72,000 gross. I mean, it was more than my net annual income. And so I looked at it and said, well, I could either buy lotto tickets, which I don't buy, or I can put it on 17 Black in Las Vegas, and I don't gamble. So I said, my only way to get out of this mess is I got to go into my own business where I don't have a ceiling. And that's what was the catalyst for me getting into my own business. But it was a result of a catastrophic failure.
Wow. Wow. And that is something that is probably not all that rare too, for people that will, gamble on something like that. And, you had I mean, the advice was right. It was just maybe the wrong stock,
The
or
wrong
maybe not
stock.
quite understanding how it worked, right?
And the lesson learned there, it's easy to say, well, that was the impetus to get me into my own business. But the lesson learned there is, you got to know what you don't know. And so, and especially in the world that I operate in now and helping people acquire businesses, the education is a foundation for everything. You can go about doing this without educated and probably give yourself a 20% chance of success, versus anything that you do, any project, anything significant, anything where you're not yet an expert. I mean, the idea is, and the internet is dangerous in that regard, because you can get all this generic information, right? And so people think, you start from zero, and you're surfing around the internet, and you think after a couple of weeks that you know something, but you actually know less. And the stuff that you've learned is maybe misinformation or not good information. So you're actually in worse shape than you were when you started. You were better off not knowing anything than knowing the wrong things, because at that point, the wrong things, you're actually dangerous. And so, the lesson is, anything you're going to attack, you've got to take a step back. You've got to get yourself educated. You got to learn the process. You got to try to attach yourself to people who know what they're doing. Mentors or otherwise. People are generally easy to help. But the big lesson there was, know what you don't know, and and take the time to educate yourself, because the decision will still be there. And if you have to make a decision in a short period of time and you don't have enough information, well, then you got to decide what your potential downside is. And if it's significant, then you're better off to say no.
Yeah, this came up in a previous episode as well, with somebody not knowing what they didn't know. right? And it's so difficult because, you can get, and I think that a lot of entrepreneurs have this possibly optimistic disposition about them, right? That, they sort of think, okay, things are going to be better than maybe they end up being.
Right.
And so you can fall into that trap pretty quickly. You get a little bit of information and all of a sudden you're like, guns ablaze and this is the way I'm going, right? And then next thing you know, right?
It's you can convince yourself pretty easily, especially, have having that optimism gene is critical for an entrepreneur. And you never want to water that down, right? Because that's what keeps you going. While other people remain employees, that's what can convert you into an employer, or allowing you to take risks that others aren't prepared to take. You want to do your homework to mitigate the risk. But yes, I mean, having that internal fire and understanding that you've got to take sometimes significant leaps. I mean, that's the blood of an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the blood of an entrepreneur. It's the blood of an aspiring business owner. The blood of an entrepreneur is someone who gets bloodied a lot and can wipe themselves off and go right back at it. And it's easy, if you're only looking at blue sky, right? Of all the things that could go right, it's very easy to convince yourself you're making the right decision, but you have to be intelligent enough to understand what can go wrong, because it's generally nothing you ever anticipated, but you want to try to mitigate your downside, and education and learning is usually the best vehicle to do that.
Yeah. And surrounding yourself with the right people as well. Because I mean, the other big benefit to this sort of disposition of optimism is that, you lose $60,000, you get back up and you make something of it, right? I mean, that's what's going to happen. I mean, you can't know everything you don't know. So there will be mistakes, and I'm guessing we're probably not even, it's telling anybody anything new. If
Right.
you're listening to this, you've probably made a bunch of mistakes already, and you're still further ahead than you were before because
Correct.
you got back up and you kept on moving, right?
Yeah, it's a very good way to look at it. And you just try to make, you try to avoid making big mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to make mistakes. And if you're someone who can't deal with it, then the world of entrepreneurship is not for you. On the other hand, if you could learn to compartmentalize and process things and learn as it goes along, and also understand nothing's perfect, right? There's always going to be headwinds. And so being able to deal, and it's like hitting tennis balls, right? So if you want to learn to play tennis, just keep hitting tennis balls. As my late partners used to say, just got to keep hitting tennis balls. And so, you're going to make these mistakes, and you just learn as you go. You just try to avoid the big ones.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways, yeah, that we can get further ahead is to surround yourself with the right people, have the right band in place, right? So, what's your sort of philosophy on who you put yourself around?
My thinking has really evolved over the years, and more so, I'm not, I don't think I'm that smart. I'm just old. And so my thinking has really evolved. When I was in business initially and on my own, I think ego and insecurity got in my way. And so I was a young business owner, and I was also a young executive when I ran into that financial mess. And so I think my insecurities of being where I was at that point, especially when I went to my own business, I did myself a terrible disservice, because I shied away from hiring people that were better than me. And I know it's 100% attributable to my ego and insecurity at that point in time. And I know I've evolved I don't want to say 180 degrees, because that would be sort of perfection. So we'll call it 160, but there's a hell of an evolution. And when I finally realized that surrounding yourself with people that are bigger, better, and faster than you, right? And you're able to let go and put those people into place and let them do their thing, and not micromanagement, and empower them to make decisions. Yeah, they may not care as much as you do as the owner, of course not, but as long as they care close to it. I mean, that to me was a massive evolution of hiring people that were bigger, better, stronger, faster, smarter than me. And it's like, I think when I look back, way back, it's like I felt more secure being the smartest person in the room, which doesn't take much because I'm not that bright. I mean, so I couldn't have that many people in the room. But way back, I felt like more comfortable. I hope this makes sense, being like the smartest person in the room. And now there's no doubt, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. Like, I want to get the hell out of the room, because that's where the real learning takes place. But that's been like, probably 30 years of evolution and really getting over and being able to park my ego at the door. And the and the other thing that was a real learning experience is I've worked with thousands and thousands of business owners, from people owning, a business that puts $25,000 into their pocket to billionaires, and that I've worked with. And the uber successful people, there's a couple things that I've really learned from them, which dovetail into what we were just talking about, which is they're not focused on the money. They're focused on building something great, right? And so, what I've learned to be able to do over time is have this philosophy and I've applied this to business, I've applied this to relationships, to everything, which is I'm going to blank a great blank by doing the following. Right. So in businesses, I'm going to build a great business by doing the following, which is hire terrific people, let them do their job, market incessantly. I'm going to have a great relationship with my wife by doing the following. I'm going to be more patient. I'm going to have better conversations. I'm going to have more meaningful interactions. I'm going to stop working at 5 o'clock and spend time together, all these things. And sort of that really evolved out of working with these crazy successful business people. When you see how they approach building a business, a lot of them suck at their personal life, but when it comes to business, there's a lesson to be learned. So I apologize for the long-winded answer, but that's sort of, how I, really evolved in that regard.
Yeah, well, it makes sense because they're laser focused on whatever it is that they're building at this particular moment, right? And sometimes other things end up falling while they're in the process of doing that, right?
Correct. Yeah. It falls, other things just take less of a priority, and it's understandable. Everybody, you don't sit in judgment, but the common denominator is, they're not focused necessarily on the money. Like if you do right by people, and if you have a product if you do right by people as opposed to being right, like if you just do right and make sure you want to get it right, if you're in anywhere where there's an economic benefit, the money's going to follow by default. I mean, it's unavoidable to be successful at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. The money follows the value, right? And,
yeah, always.
A lot of people don't get right but that's just because I think we've been taught in the whole, the employee mindset of, you go to work, you put your time in, you get your paycheck, you go home. So you really are, I would say most people who have a job are actually doing that job for the money, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can't blame them. They got to survive.
Nope.
I mean, I was reading a study not long ago, and I think it was Gallup who did it, and found that like 74% of the people despise their job. I mean, not dislike it, despise it. I mean, yeah. But you can't, there's some people who just can't make that transition to something else. They've got to make money. They got bills, they got mortgage, they got kids and what have you. And so, in some ways you almost have to respect that more, because they know that this doesn't make them happy, but they got to push through and do what they got to do.
Yeah. And, on the other side of that spectrum, some people could be working at a business forever and never really getting it off the ground, working at a purpose, I guess. Right.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they probably haven't put themselves around the right people, around the right mentors, all that other stuff as well, because that'll definitely make things a little bit easier.
Right.
Which, speaking of which, you mentioned a few different people that you were able to learn from. How was that relationship of learning from these super successful people? Like, did you hire them, or were you friends with? Like, how did that work out? How did they end up being in your circle?
Okay, so there's been a number of them, and I guess one thing that I, really realized a number of years ago is, and it's not my realization, it's the oldest formula for success, which is like, if you want to do something new or something you don't have experience in, just find someone who's already done it successfully and copy them, right? I mean, and even better yet, get them to mentor you. And so, whenever I've gotten into something, whether it be a business or something that I was thinking of doing or jumping into, try to find the best possible people to ask them questions, not necessarily hiring any or all of them. I have found that most people are willing to help. Most people take it as a compliment. If you can call, you should never be afraid to call I was looking at one product which was related to a men's cosmetic line, and I called the CEO of Estee Lauder companies and met with them. And you know what? Surprisingly enough, they're happy to meet with you. They're not giving you hours of time, but for an hour, ask the questions. So I think anybody is approachable. And I believe that, you're far better off to start at the top and work your way down. And so if there's something that you want to do, you ask people, and some people will say no. And
Yep.
but a lot of people will say yes. So I've met some terrific people along the way. And I, I'd like to believe that I'm intellectually curious. I'm probably in the business that I'm in because I really love learning about new businesses, new things, and what have you. And so if you have this idea, this never ending thirst to learn and ask questions and ask why and never be satisfied with the answer until you understand it completely, as opposed to just getting an answer at base level. I think anybody, adopting that will learn a great deal, and asking the right people. If you ask people for help, they're not, it's surprisingly, most people are willing to. And I've had some, clients that have been ridiculously successful. I worked for 3 years with the Dalio family and was hired by Ray Dalio to mentor his son, who became my partner. He's passed away in a tragedy in a car accident a number of years ago, unfortunately, of course. But being around someone like Ray and people that we had access to, it was, they're great learning experiences. If you could just shut the hell up and listen, you could learn an unbelievable amount.
Hi, my name is Anik Malafon from Mastering Ascension, and I've been working with Tim Melanson and the Creative Crew Agency for a number of years now. Tim is my go-to guy for all things technology, and his team have helped me to really create the platform that I need that represents my brand, my message, and connects me directly to my ideal clients. What I particularly love about Tim is before he starts to dive into the technology, he always makes sure that he understands what your global view is, what your ultimate goals are. So then that way you're not wasting a lot of time back and forth switching around technology or platforms. He creates something from the get-go that is scalable, which is highly, highly beneficial for any business. What I've experienced from Tim and his team is they're highly responsive. They are a wealth of information, and they're going to offer you the tools that you need to really make the mark that you want to make in the world. So that's my recommendation for Tim. He's awesome. You're going to love every minute. You won't regret it.
And this keeps coming up too, about the willingness of people in positions of success to help others. And I think it's probably because I doubt there's very many of these people that climb that mountain on their own. They probably reached out to somebody at some point in their journey and asked for some help and got it. And now it's at a point where someone else is, asking them for help. And like what you just said, they feel flattered. They're like, really? I'm at the top of the mountain now. Right
Yeah.
on.
So right on. And it's there's a lot of people, and again, some people may say no, but most people I find are kind and fair and take it as a compliment. I'm inundated with students who are looking to get involved in investment banking and some of the stuff that I've done over the years, and want to know and spend time together. And I answer every email, and I get slammed with them. But I get a lot of them who ask me if they could spend, 15 to 30 minutes on a call with me, or some will say 30 minutes. And I can't say no. I can't say yes to everybody, because the amount I get, I'd probably be on the phone all day long. But I always look for, if someone has said something interesting, or I get the sense from their email that they haven't just, it's not a rote email. If, like, you could tell if they've sent it to 100, the same email to 100 people, like, dear Mr. or Mrs. fill in the blank, right? But if they've taken the time to gone to my website, or if they've gone to LinkedIn, or if they've done a little background check and they put something personal in there, right? I noticed I noticed that your first acquisition and your first time you bought a business, you were 12 years old, or I know you bought a business in here, or you worked with the Dalio family office. So if they put something personal there, I spend time. I had one yesterday. I was on the phone with a guy he was going to University of Michigan. He's a sophomore. He wanted to get into investment banking or finance. I spent an hour with him on the phone. He just wanted to understand what the path is. And I'm not saying it in a way that, like, I'm better than the next person, because I'm certainly not. But, I'm at a certain stage in my career, and there's some recognition and profile. There's gobs of people like me, or gobs of people who have that attitude. If someone wanted to do a podcast and someone called you, you'd be flattered. You're not looking at it as competition. You want to help them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Oh, wow. That's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about practicing. I read a stat somewhere that said that an overwhelming majority of people never read a book outside of high school once they graduate. And I find that amazing. I think I've read way more since I left high school than I did in high school. But Let me get your thoughts on, how do you stay good and get good at what you're doing?
Well, I read constantly. I use my mother's example. My 92-year-old mother was here for 3 months last winter, spending winter with us in Florida after she sold her condo. She reads a book, like the equivalent to a book and a half a week at 92 years old. Right. And she was going into my library here. I mean, was banging through them at the speed of light. I'm always reading up to my challenge is I'm sometimes reading two or three things, but I always, even when with my kids, I said, there was the ABR rule, which was always be reading. You have to be reading something. And whatever it may be, it could be fiction, it could be nonfiction, something like could be, something that's going to just help your imagination or what have you. It doesn't have to always be business books. Some books are just boring as hell. But so for me, honing the craft is always making sure that, I read whatever I can. If there's a good book, someone recommends it to me, or if I read a good book, I send it out to a bunch of people. I just make sure that, and I also find it's a great way to get away from this. Right. And so,
Yeah.
and just if I look at a book, like some of them that I've read, some of the great ones that I've read, I look at it. My approach to them is if I'm looking for a book for information versus a fiction, because I like John Grisham as an escape. But if I'm looking for something for an edge or business information or knowledge, I look at it and say, okay, if it's a 500-page book, if I learn one thing from the whole book, it's well worth how many hours it took me to read it. That's the way I approach reading a book. No, wow. if it's nonfiction, and I think fiction is important too. And I think so I think honing the craft, or staying ahead. So I'm always reading, always learning. I spend every morning, the first thing I do is go through all my Google alerts. I go through the industry news and I read all of that. I try as best as possible when I'm not playing ice hockey with my old guys. I try to sit at night and read a book, and I've encouraged my kids to do that. It translates very much into, the world where I operate, where I teach people how to buy businesses and how important it is that, understanding that them buying the right business is everything, right, in this whole process. And so for them, that's a learning. They have to learn about themselves in that. So to me, it's like you're honing your craft, figuring out who you are exactly and what you're good at and what you're not good at, in order to make sure that you marry your greatest skill with the right business. And then, chances are you're going to do very well. If you mess up a few parts of the other parts of the process, it's not the end of the world. But if you marry your greatest skill with the right business, you're going to be fine. So I think in my world, understanding how honing your craft is constant. And there's so much information. The danger is staying away from the misinformation, of course, but getting to, to me, honing your craft is really a combination of reading. It's a combination of talking to people. It's also an important thing, I believe, is surrounding yourself with people that are going to take you along the road in a good way, that they're going to drag you along by default. Right. And I don't mean, there's this old thing, like if you hang around with thieves, you become a thief. If you hang around with a loser, you become a loser. Try to hanging around with people that are really better than you in a lot of ways. Like you get the crumbs and you get better.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned something during that focusing on what you're good at. And I think that in our school systems, we tend to be focused a little bit more on the weakness, right? We're trying to get the lowest grade up, rather than focusing on the fact that, hey, you just got 100% this course over here. Who cares about the failing grade over here, right? But
absolutely,
that's what we're sort of taught, right? And then after, when you get into the business world, we do want to focus a little bit more on the what you're good at. But what do you think would be like? Is there a value to focusing on the weakest mark, or do you think you should always just double down on what you're good at?
Well, I think if you can get to the point that you have something that you really like and that you're really good at, then I think you should focus on that intensely. That's what I believe. There's nothing wrong, and it's always good, was probably a better choice of words, to improve your weaknesses, but not at the expense of leveraging your strengths. Right. So, in my business, I've run a pretty significant business, and I've turned this into a business that I've run with very few employees now. I outsource everything. I know the financials inside out. I can read a balance sheet, profit and loss statement as good as anybody, but I don't do the accounting. Right. And so, and I wasn't good at it years ago, but I look in and say, to me, to answer your question related to strengths and weaknesses, if you were talking about the application to entrepreneurship, the other stuff is good to learn, but I think you go much further down the road in a much happier way if you just take what you're really good at and like even beyond a laser beam, like which with unwavering intensity. And I think if you take that and there's an economic benefit to it, then it's going to equal it. It conjugates with success, right? It just, there's an equal sign, and the word on the other side is success. So, the weakness piece, I'm with you. I think like this idea of like focusing on kids' weakness, they're not good in English, so let's focus on that. Well, maybe they're so probably, and they're terrific in math. Like, well, maybe that's their calling, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like the core classes that you have to take the first 2 years of university. What the hell is the point of that, right? Wouldn't you be better served to take 10 courses in a wide array of categories, from criminal justice to marketing to finance to nursing, and see, hey, maybe amongst those 10 there's something I really like. And then if you get that sort of excitement, then you focus like that. Like, again, to me it's like focus with absolute intensity, unwavering intensity.
It's interesting. Imagine if that's how it worked, right? When you got in there, instead of a core classes, it was a random. They literally just pick random courses that you have to take.
That would be my university, by the way, the version of my university, all those, chemistry, English, algebra. Once you get into university, like to me, my university would be 4 years. The first 2 years is nothing but random classes from, medical billing. The next class is in music appreciation. The third one might be in, classic English literature to choreography. I mean, just criminal justice to marketing, like all over the place, and give everyone an opportunity to spend, a semester of 4 or whatever number of courses, general interest, with no homework and no tests.
Wow. I'd go to that university. That'd be super cool.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And it probably can get you financing, right?
Right on.
And the thing is that to try to do that without student debt. But to me, that would be, just people would come out so much better on the other end, right? Like, just I don't even understand how going through school in Canada versus here. I mean, that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's going to change.
It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And I have 3 of my 4 kids are professionals, right? Doctor, lawyer, and speech pathologist. So they've gone through that whole grind. But my youngest son, who was a high level hockey player for many years, and just getting back into the college world, it's like where do you start to find something of interest? No, you're not going to find it unless you get some exposure to it.
Yeah, I have 2 kids in high school, and it's an interesting experience when they're talking about university, and I don't have the same opinion as I had when I went to university. And when I went to university was when it was changing. Like,
Yes.
If I had known what I know now, I probably wouldn't have taken that university course. I would have taken a college course instead.
Right.
But now, it just seems to be like just a giant business with no real direction for any of the kids that are going into it, right? It's just,
what they're producing is a flawed product. I mean, and I'm not even talking about some of the recent events that have happened related to stuff that's coming to the forefront of, things that are going on university campus. I'm just talking about, if the goal is to prepare people for their work life and life, they've failed unless they get this in phenomenal degree. They become a doctor, an accountant, an attorney, or a high level finance degree where they can get something, a specific job. I think that, like, to me, the outcome is a disaster. That's my personal opinion. Doesn't mean I'm right. My thinking may be completely flawed, but to me, my view is it's not only bad, it's a disaster.
Yeah, this would be a great podcast, episode just talking about that, right?
Yes.
And I think it'd be highly useful too, especially to some of the kids, because they are very pushed into the university. Like, we're seeing that happening with our kids. They have guidance counselors coming in talking about it like it's just a done deal. Like, oh, you're definitely going. And meanwhile, like, who's going to pay for it? Like,
Right.
What am I going to do once I graduate? Like,
how do I get out of this hole? One of the people that was speaking to yesterday, who I said the sophomore, was asking me what I thought of an MBA degree. I said, well, if you asked me this 30 years ago, I would tell you it's worth it. If you ask me today, I think you're wasting your time and your money. The only thing it's good for your resume. So if that's what it takes to get the job, that's fine. But if you're looking at this for whether or not it's going to improve your skills immeasurably versus what you can get in the real world, it's not even close.
No, agree. So, all right, we can talk about this forever, but it's time for your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business right now.
So my business is very interesting. Especially this time, my business, I'm happy to say, is doing unbelievable. We have more people than ever, acquiring our materials and doing great. And the one thing when I developed these materials is made it very important that anybody who's looking to acquire a business can call me or email me anytime. I'm happy to get on the phone. I never charge them. One of the negative things that's happening in our business, and the reason why I've gotten so re-energized over the last couple of years, and even less so with some of the social media, which I'm not a social media guy, but I've hired a company for that and do most of it, is there's just this proliferation of bad information, right? And there's also this proliferation of these alleged gurus that are selling these programs on entrepreneurship for people, whether it be buying a business or starting a business or buying real estate or whatever. And it just makes my blood boil, because most of these people have never even done what they're selling materials on, teaching people how to do. What they're really good at is they're really good at marketing, right? And, you give them your money. Some people spend thousands of dollars with them, and you don't get anything at the end, right? All you get is a debt. And so, that part has really incentivized me to try to repair the world in information products, if that makes any sense, because our whole agenda, we just want to help people. I never even went into this business to make money. I just wanted to help some people buy businesses. And that attitude has never changed. I never in my wildest dreams thought that this would turn into selling 100,000 copies and all over the world. It's like, I still shake my head at it. But I know, I take a step back and look at it, is like the agenda has always been pure and sincere of just helping people and charging like ridiculous amount of cheap, it's like negligible. It's almost embarrassing what we charge people to acquire our materials, because I didn't care about the money. Like if I don't sell another course, it makes no difference to my life, but really helping people. So, but there's been so many more people that have come in the market in the last few years. And that could be a result of, the economy, or seeing more people on social media successful, which is a bad thing in itself, because people think you could just get there without doing the work or without paying your dues. But the market itself has become really frothy, as they say. There's a lot of people in my world. So that part is really, really exciting on the business side of things. On the personal side of things, became a grandfather not long ago. So that weighs everything on the business side. So that's been great.
So then how do we find out more about your programs then?
So the easiest way is they should go to richardparker.com. There's hundreds of free articles there. I mean, if anyone is interested in, taking deeper steps and looking at some of the courses, you can access them from there. But I'd really encourage people that even have the inkling of, thinking about getting into their own business. Like if it's any part of your brain, like you owe it to yourself to at least to go through the effort to find out what's involved with it. Right. Yeah. And so, you're doing yourself a disservice by at least not finding out what's involved. So, if you go to richardparker.com, there's there's hundreds of articles, free articles related to buying a business and all the different stages in the process. And people can get a decent education and, see if it somehow piques their interest. And similarly, people that are, have work at home businesses, even their smaller business, should think about expanding their businesses through acquisition, other like businesses. And so they end up going through the same process with a little bit of departure if they're buying a competitor, what have you. But by and large, it's the same process.
Would there be like a major difference in the personality of a person who would build a business versus buy a business?
Yes. I think starting a business is wonderful for anybody to do during the course of their lifetime, because it's a good learning experience. I don't have probably the stomach to do it anymore, right? Because the thing I learned with startups, and I've done a bunch of them, is like the revenue comes in twice as slow and the expenses happen twice as fast. And at the beginning, there's nothing done. I mean, you don't even own paper clips. And so like everything seems wonderful and blue sky and terrific. And so it's very easy to convince yourself, as you talked about earlier, things are going to be terrific. I'm a massive believer in buying an existing business because everything is in place. It's not perfect. Businesses have warts, but you have customers, you have employees, the phone rings with customers or the emails come in. You have products, you have a history, you have a financial history, you have a track record, you have relationships. And theoretically, if you do this properly, the theoretical piece marries the practical piece, which means the following. If you do it properly, you get the keys on Monday, you take a paycheck on Friday. And you can't beat that.
No, no, you can't start a business that fast, for
You
sure.
can't, and it's nothing but a money pit. And so, the thing that I would tell people is, all of this information that you see online allude to these so-called gurus again of buying these businesses or, that throw off hundreds of thousands of dollars and you can buy them for no money down in 30 days. That's, pardon my French, a complete bullshit. I mean, that doesn't work. It takes money. It doesn't take a lot because there's incredible leverage and there's seller financing, there's other financing programs, and you could really leverage, right? But you need to have a little bit of capital, right, to do this properly. But comparing a startup to buying an existing business, I mean, it's one of those cases where I could not represent both sides, both cases, because it's not even close. If you can get into buying an existing business, you're way down the road. If you're running, a marathon, starting a business, you're not even at the starting gate. You're still training. Okay, buying an existing business, you're like at mile 22 already.
So now your resources, do some of those have information about the seller financing and, stuff about that too?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah. In great detail. And in our materials, there's probably a 50-page chapter related to financing and how you negotiate seller financing. And our last audit, 91% of our clients get a component of seller financing in their deals. It varies, but 91% of them. So it's very doable. And it's not like we're miraculous. It's very often that's what it takes to get the deal to the finish line on the part of the seller. But understanding how to get there, because at the beginning, sellers say, "I'm not financing you." Well, we show you exactly how to convince them of that, and it's a formula that we've proven over and over and over and over and over again. It works, right? So it's not pie in the sky. But yes, all those reasons on richardparker.com, you can walk through, and it talks about seller financing and different steps that you can take related to that piece of it. How you investigate businesses, where you can start to look. I mean, the articles are and they're broken down, by the way, into the various stages of the buying process. Have categories, and then in those categories, each one has 5 to 50 articles.
I'm gonna have to check that out myself because
Please do,
I've
and I welcome any feedback.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I never considered buying a business. I always thought about just building my own business, right? I figured that buying a business, you buy a business with. Well, I think my misconception, and it probably is a misconception, you're going to tell me, is that anybody selling a business, there must be something wrong with that business.
Not at all. And your misconception is 100% common, number one. The other misconception is people believe that, buying businesses, that's for big corporations. I can't do that. And that's another wives' tale, as they say, or misconception. So yes, it's, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of garbage businesses, right?
Oh yeah.
And but you learn to, as you learn how to do this, you learn to say no quickly and you learn to identify them. But there's just like gobs of terrific business. People sell their businesses. The average business sells every 5 years. So there's 10 million businesses in the United States that are considered not single employee businesses, right? So if you take small business that's classified as not single employee, you have 10 million of those. For your listeners that work at home, there's a lot of the businesses where they're all one employee. So you're probably talking about a pool of 30 million businesses, right? They sell every 5 years. So that's like 6 million businesses for sale at any one time. There's lots of good ones. There's lots of good businesses run by the wrong people. There's also lots of good businesses where the owner is, retiring, or there's the morbid issues, health, financial, divorce, etc. They have to sell, or they're getting involved in something else. Sometimes people just get a little bored. So there are tons of good businesses, tons of them. That's it really is a misconception.
Wow. Well, I'm going to check out richardparker.com then. It's really cool.
Beautiful. And if I can help you with anything at any time, you know how to get in touch with me. You have my email. I'm happy to get on a call with you, or have an email exchange. If anything, I can help you with at any point in time. Likewise, any of you people who listen, there's the link to the contact us page on richardparker.com. If they just put in there to please send it to me directly, I'll get it. I'm happy to answer questions. I love doing this, and it gives me I've owned a lot of businesses. This is the greatest from a gratification standpoint, because you really make a dent in the world, right? Of helping people. And that's that's the best.
Awesome. Well, this has been a very, very good conversation. I really appreciate you being here, Richard. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Your questions are terrific, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Great. And to the listeners, make sure you subscribe, rate, and comment, and we'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.